Okay, let's start. Let's see. Yep. Okay, we got it. Thank you. I never left Auschwitz and you will never enter. These are the words of Holocaust survivor Asher Ud. And they resonate with me because they strike at the heart of the challenge of representing eyewitness testimony of Holocaust survivors in a museum setting. Museums don't just present historical facts, they present human stories because storytelling is the best way we know to connect humans to other humans. So today my question is, what is the place and the impact on the visitor of encountering such testimony when it is not delivered by the survivors themselves in person, but rather via digital means? So I work at the Jewish Holocaust Museum in Melbourne, Australia, which was established by a group of Holocaust survivors 35 years ago. Melbourne had a large post-war migration of Holocaust survivors, and most of the Jews in our community are descendants of survivors, and many volunteer with us. And at our centre, students every day still have the opportunity to hear testimony from Holocaust survivors, and our education program is built around them. It's a highlight of the school visit, and it is irreplaceable. And the interesting thing is that it is powerful, even though many of the survivors now, being much older, tend to ramble, at times go off on tangents and don't listen to the educators who are trying to direct them to give a more coherent narrative. So what will we do in the future when survivors become less articulate and then are no longer with us? And we're working on several initiatives concurrently. So let me tell you about them and consider the issues and the challenges we're facing. There was a pop song in the 1950s, Walk a Mile in My Shoes. Some of you may be familiar with it. The phrase walk a mile in my shoes is about empathy. And those are actually Gerda Stanley's shoes. Gerda Stanley was a survivor who came to Melbourne, and those shoes, she attributed her survival to those shoes that she had on a death march, and they're on display in the museum. As Holocaust educators, one of our challenges is to make our students empathetic, because from empathy comes understanding. Knowing is comprehension, but understanding is deeper because it comes from empathy or identification. We don't want our students to just know about the Holocaust. We want something deeper, because deeper knowledge sticks. In To Kill a Mockingbird, Atticus tells his daughter Scout, "You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb inside of his skin and walk around in it." This notion hit me right between the eyes, quite literally, when I first watched a virtual reality documentary called Clouds Over Sidra. The creator of this excellent documentary, Chris Milk, has said of VR, "It's difficult to explain because it's a very experiential media. You feel your way inside of it. It's a machine, but inside of it, it feels like real life. It feels like truth. You feel present in the world that you're inside, and you feel present with the people that you're inside of it with." I have, in fact, heard VR referred to as an empathy machine. So walking around the Zaatari refugee camp in Jordan with 12-year-old Sidra as my guide gave me an intimate understanding of what life is like for these refugees. I connected. She took me into her bedroom. I sat in the makeshift school with her. I was with the men baking bread. It remains unforgettable. As Chris Milk says, you feel her humanity in a deeper way. You empathise with her in a deeper way. So we at the Holocaust Centre in Melbourne took a leap of faith, and we commenced work on Walk With Me, Immersive Survivor Testimony in 2017. We went with a survivor, Shia Chaskell, to his hometown in Wielun, Poland, and then to all the sites of his incarceration, including the former Lodz ghetto, Auschwitz and Buchenwald camps, and we filmed him with a 360-degree camera. And that's what's special about our film. He's telling the stories he tells our visitors every week, But with the headsets on, it's as if you are there in those places with him. We wanted to convey the enormity of Auschwitz-Birkenau, which most people... Oops. Oh, I don't have that slide. Which most people cannot comprehend. Actually, maybe I do have that slide. Oh, there we go. So we organised for a drone to film. And it really helps you understand the scale. We hope people will learn about the scale of the mass murder, but then engage with one survivor who brings it to a human level. And the survivor we took, Shia, is an engaging person, and his story is about the resilience of a teenager in the face of overwhelming adversity. Our challenge now is to edit the film and to work with our educators and decide how to present the story. Our emphasis is on authenticity and integrity. And while VR gives more agency to the viewer than traditional films, we are in fact curating the path and the narrative. It's not going to be a gaming situation where you can choose which way you want to go next. So at our museum, Walk With Me Immersive Survivor Testimony will be the starting point for educating the students, connecting them with a survivor telling his story. Once engaged and receptive, we can teach them valuable lessons about history and humanity and arouse their interest to do further exploration themselves. In other words, we've framed the survivor testimony within the historical context. It's not a standalone experience. It'll be scaffolded by a suite of pedagogical offerings. We are aiming to complete the film by the end of the year and commence trial and evaluation in 2020 and further refinement. We had hoped to maybe create a second film with another survivor, but as you can probably appreciate, to take a survivor from Australia to Poland is not an easy thing to do. It's hard enough to bring me here. It's like midnight in my brain. But no, it's the implications of taking someone. Shia was 87 when we took him, and he's a pretty robust gentleman, thankfully, but I wouldn't really want to do that again with someone else. So right now we're fortunate, and we still have the survivors coming each week and talking to students, but they are 85 to 95 years old. We had a survivor who spoke a month ago. He's 97 years old, and he passed away last week, so that's the reality of what we're working with. We're very fortunate to have such a large group. We have about 25 survivors currently active, but they're not getting younger. Their presence has great power because they were there, and for the visiting students, this has an element of awe. But we need to convey their stories, not just excite the students. So we created short-form video testimonies, which we screen now with the survivors present, following which the students can ask them questions. The experience still has the power for the students as they meet the survivors, but the survivors don't have the pressure of telling their own stories. Their pre-recorded videos, which were made around 2003, do it much better than they can with their own voice today. But equally, we're preparing for the day when the survivors are not with us. So currently, we have this robust group who are getting less and less robust every week. But for the last 6 years, we've filmed each of them and asked them the most commonly asked questions. And asking questions is a vital part of student learning. So via video, future visitors will have the opportunity to ask survivors questions, such as, now, can we get this to play, is the question. Let's see if it works. Do we have volume? Okay. Maybe we can go back and get volume. I could do a mime act, but suffice to say, Edita to the rescue. She's done it once before. Let's see. Let's see how good she is. No, that's working. It's just
a minute.
Okay, in the meantime, I'll tell you another story because stories are what connect us. So one of the reasons I was so eager to come to Riga was because my great-grandmother Emma Heiser was from a town called Kassel in Germany. And she had 3 daughters, including my grandmother. And in the 30s, her daughters, my great-grandfather Wilfrid Heiser had fought for Germany in World War I. And he died of, I thought he died a hero, but he actually had, he caught the influenza in 1917 and died as a German Jewish soldier. And so my Emma Heiser was a war widow, and she had 3 daughters. And in the 30s, they each left, one to Palestine, one to America. And the last was my grandmother, who did not want to leave her mother, but in 1938, she and her husband had the opportunity to leave. And they went to Singapore, and my Emma said, go, and when you get somewhere, organise papers for me. And they went to Singapore. They were stateless refugees. My mother was born in Singapore. Then they were rounded up by the British as enemy aliens because they were Germans and put in a camp in Australia, which is how I end up Australian. Emma Heiser, on the 9th of December 1941, was deported with the Kassel Jews to Riga. And she didn't survive. But I really wanted to thank Menachem, who's not here, for what he's done at the Riga Ghetto Memorial, because to see her name somewhere acknowledged was a very emotional moment for me yesterday. So he's not here, but I'm thanking him and the work that the whole team do. Did you get it going? Because I've filled some time, but I don't want to take any more.
The answer is no, and the reason is very simple. For the same reason that I was born a Jew, they were born Germans. And Germans don't get the guilt of their parents, as is written in the Bible, to the 7th generation. I don't believe it. I think that people are born, whatever they are, and they are responsible for their own actions, not for the actions of their parents.
Thank you. And there's one more, but we've taken up enough of your time. So I just wanted to say, I think you get a sense that they'll still get the opportunity to hear an answer, and we have a number of answers because obviously different survivors have different opinions on all these questions. But Asher Ud is right. I can go to Auschwitz, I can walk around what's today a tourist site, but I will never really enter Auschwitz as the survivors knew it. But nonetheless, it's our solemn duty to do our best to share survivor eyewitness accounts with our audience, to make connections through storytelling in all of our museums, to complement the history exhibited on the museum walls. So I encourage you in your museums and sites to explore and experiment with new media, always with authenticity and integrity. And if you know any survivors in your community, then try and find someone with a 360-degree camera and take them to a site that relates to their story. It doesn't really have to be a high-budget exercise. For us, it was high budget because we had to fly 4 people from Australia, but for some of you, it's not so hard. And just make a very short film. It doesn't need to be a long film to establish that connection. And that's my message for you. Just because we can't enter Auschwitz doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. Thank you.